Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of the Media Podcast. Would you believe it? I certainly don't. Alright, so this year we're doing 1997, which is a year that I had, and it was always changing what was going to be picked. I could never find a film from 97 I really liked, even though I found quite a few now, because it's been 3 years in the making of this podcast. I was going to do Tony Blair winning the 1997 general election at one point.
Oh my god, I remember.
Is that a film? That's a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to fucking break the podcast. And I was going to... Yeah, I went through a lot of phases, but I picked some things that I think are pretty good. That I watched and played a couple of years ago now, so let's see how good my memory is. But first, some honourable mentions. Let's do that part of the podcast. I guess I'll go first because I'm talking, and it's easier if I just keep talking. So yeah, I picked Star Fox 64, which was, I think, for the longest time was going to be my pick. And the reason I didn't do it was because the only version that's convenient to play, unless you have an N64, is the 3DS kind of remake.
And
it's so much like it. Yeah, and the problem with that is the game is just so fundamentally different to how the N64 version looks and plays. It's almost a different game, so I felt it's kind of cheating to pick that. Also, it's not that good. So yeah, that was my honorable mention.
I played a Star Fox DS game. I remember you have to draw a circle on the touchpad to do the barrel roll. That's all I remember from that game.
Did you have the stylus? Or
I did not. I had to break my thumb. Where
What is it about you and drawing circles?
Well, I've got tons of practice. Actually, they're not even circles. They're more rough ovoids.
My favourite kind.
Yeah, Star Fox. He's in Smash, I think. That's what I know about him. Anyone else got any fun Star Fox facts?
It's an okay game.
Ethan, what's your honourable mention?
My honourable mention is a film called Gattaca, starring Ethan Hawke, Jude Law, and Uma Thurman. Now, the plot of Gattaca is one I don't believe I've talked about very much with people on this podcast. It's about...
You see, Ethan Hawke, he was conceived the natural way.
So Ethan Hawke was conceived the natural way. And he was jealous because his brother was not conceived the natural way. And he was always underperforming when it came to his... when it came to comparing himself with his brother. And what Ethan Hawke wants to do, essentially, is he wants to go to the moon. But in this futuristic setting... he's not allowed because he was conceived the natural way. And the film itself has a murder investigation going along this plot where this facility that Ethan Hawke works at, someone has died and they start to suspect Ethan Hawke for it. And that's kind of the plot of the film. I've seen it a couple of times. I think the first time I watched it, I would have been maybe 15 years old. I think it was definitely at some point during secondary school. But it's a pretty decent film. I'd recommend it as a good piece of science fiction. It definitely raises some interesting questions about, I guess, nature versus nurture in that capacity of two children being raised and brought up, and one was designed to just be more effective at everything, essentially, whereas the other one kind of took the brunt of that because he was conceived the natural way.
Didn't he beat him in the swimming race too? That's the other thing.
Yeah, that's a big emotional core of the film, that Ethan Hawke beat his brother at a swimming race. When his brother should have effectively beaten him. But yeah.
Because he was like a designer baby.
It's
type.
kind of that, yeah.
So is this like a eugenics thing?
Yeah, I mean the cool fact about Gattaca is that the letters that make up Gattaca are G, T, A, and C, and they're the 4 letters that make up strands of DNA, I think. Well, not the 4 letters themselves, but you know, I can't remember what it is exactly. I'm not a biologist. I didn't really pay much attention when we did biology at GCSE.
Yeah. I mean, all humans are made out of alphabeti spaghetti, but only exclusively the letters G, A, T, and C.
I think the thing we have to mention about Gattaca, why it's like a joke, is just that for some reason Ethan just told me the plot of Gattaca like a number of times. I'd say at least 3 times.
It's because we always found ways to bring up Gattaca, and I would always use those ways to tell you a bit about the plot, just because I thought it was a really interesting idea for a film.
Yeah, and then it became like a joke that Ethan would always start by going, Ethan Hawke was conceived the natural way. That became like a thing.
The strangest part about this is I swear Ethan Hawke is also the name of the main character in the Mission Impossible series.
That's Ethan Hunt.
Ah, fuck. But that's close.
It's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah.
Very close.
That's basically plagiarism.
Anyway, I'm gonna try and transition from Gattaca into The Fifth Element, because, you know, it's sci-fi. That's a sort of link there.
Real
but
sci-fi
whereas Gattaca... But yeah, whereas Gattaca seems to be trying to ask questions, The Fifth Element is just a fun romp. I don't really feel like there's much to say about it. It's just a fun comedy that I've thoroughly enjoyed and watched twice, which is my sort of... That's how a film has been good to me, as I've watched it a second time.
Yeah, The Fifth Element is one that, in my attempts to watch, because I had no film from '97 that I'd seen or liked, so I've made it like a mission to watch all the films that I think I'd like from '97, of which I think I've seen most, but The Fifth Element is the one that I kept meaning to get around to, but never did. Seems kind of good though. Although Bruce Willis, I don't know how much hair he has in it. That would determine if it's good or not.
If he was in that cursed midpoint, that's the same frame as he is in that one shot in Looper. It's like a fucking mess. It's like he's got a wig that's half on.
Does anyone know when Bruce Willis started to lose his hair? Because he still had some in Pulp Fiction. That's mid-90s. And this is a few years later.
90s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably hard to tell just from films, because I imagine makeup would cover some of that stuff up, right? Maybe put on this toupee.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Maybe he shaved it and it never grew back, for a role or something. We don't know.
That'd be tragic. Anyway, I've been trying to make a joke/gag about boron for ever since you said Fifth Element, and I had to Google what the Fifth Element was to make the joke. But there's no setup. It's just the word boron. It has 5 elements in it. That's what I think it is. I'm sorry, I didn't do well in chemistry. Anyway.
Wait, what was that? Boron has 5 elements.
Boron. It has 5. It's the 5th element. Is that what the film's about?
Definitely. It's my favourite bit when you reach the emotional climax of the movie and they just all sort of slap their heads and oh, we've been idiots. It's boron!
I have a feeling they probably make that joke in the film.
Earth, wind, fire...
Is boron the reason that Ethan Hawke won the swimming race?
The crazy thing is, I've seen The Fifth Element near 10 times, but the last time that I watched it, I was so young that I can't even remember how it ends. It's something to do with Mila Jovovich. They bring her to some pyramid, I think, out in the desert.
Alright, don't spoil the ending.
Don't spoil it. Don't spoil what the Fifth Element is.
Don't spoil when they get to... Wait, let me look at this in the periodic table. Carbon.
But it's boron. We already said this.
Yeah, but carbon's on the fucking... The end credit T is a long chained carbon molecule. It's yo, I've got a benzene ring on me. What's that about?
Oh.
Anyway,
Tony, what's my pick?
Princess Mononoke.
Princess Mononoke is actually really good. I like that I have picked this completely coincidentally. This very anti-technology, anti-war film to go to fucking everyone else picking sci-fi films and us going in to talk about Starship Troopers. It's like feel that fucking like Starship Troopers and Princess Mononoke are like, if there was some form of axis that you could place all films on, both films would be at either ends of the extreme. And in horseshoe theory, that means they're exactly the same. Basically, it's this Studio Ghibli film that's about a boy, Prince Ashitaka, who he gets in a fight with a boar and has to go on an epic journey to cure the curse that it gives him, where he meets this fucking wolf lady on the way. So it's a very good just tale about like how war is bad, as is the general theme in a lot of Miyazaki's work. It shows off nature in just a very beautiful way. It has an amazing score. I think the theme that's Legend of Ashitaka is probably one of my favorite ones from any of the films. It's real good. I know you've all seen it, so I want you to pipe in. Come on, Ethan.
Silence.
Ethan. I know you think her name is Lady Eboshi, and it's not.
What are you talking about? I always thought she was called Lady Eboshi.
Fuck off. Fuck off. Can't believe we had this. When did we first have this argument? 3 years ago.
I mean, it would have been when you watched the film, right? So maybe year 12?
The best thing about this is that if we'd done this podcast like when it was originally planned, I wouldn't even like Princess Mononoke that much. But now I really like it because I've had like time to reflect and rewatch it.
Yeah,
It's probably better than Starship Troopers, to be honest. Should have picked this.
Should we record a podcast on Princess Mononoke instead then? I mean, I second that motion.
I mean, we could record a podcast.
What if I drop Castlevania and we just do Mononoke?
I mean, podcast in a podcast. Princess Mononoke. Hello and welcome to the Media Podcast, episode 1997. Today we're doing the Princess Mononoke and Starship Troopers.
Okay. So, Princess Mononoke, war is bad and nature is good. What scores have we given it?
10. Easy cap.
Ethan? What are you giving it?
High 9.
Respectable.
I think I'll go for a 9 as well. Johnny?
I'll go for an 8.
Nice. Alright, should we
That makes
move
a
on?
30 club easily, right? Put it on there, Harry. Put it on that.
That's like the best pick I've ever done. I think it's probably my favorite Studio Ghibli film, if I think about it. It's very similar to the one we watched together that I've forgotten the name of, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. There we go. A similar, nature good, people evil kind of thing, but that's more post-apocalyptic, whereas this is has like a cool ancient mythology vibe to it, where there are big animals roaming about.
I do like the way it plays off Princess Mononoke and Lady Eboshi. The two very respected women from very different fields or areas. So you've got one much more close to nature and the animals, and another who's like this celebrated industrial leader. It's very interesting. There's a sort of my favourite things it picks up on.
And then Billy Bob Thornton is just some little guy.
Oh yeah, I remember that character. I know the character you're talking about.
See the Baby O.
No, Billy Bob Thornton plays the guy who he meets, who he walks with a little bit before getting to Irontown and meeting those soldiers. And he comes back towards the end. He's the one who's carrying the head.
He's not a little creature from a different film.
That's one of the films, right? I think there's something interesting that happens in Ghibli films when they do the dubbing, is they get a much wider range of accents to do. Maybe I just can't tell Japanese accents that well, but it feels like Lady Eboshi has a fucking proper British voice actress rather, and sounds like Daisy Ridley. And you've got this that guy Billy Bob Thornton who sounds like a fucking cowboy. He's doing a weird voice. It's kind of strange. He's just a regular guy in the fucking subtitle version.
Yeah, if we're talking about the dub as well, it's one of the best. I mean, Neil Gaiman was such a big fan that he wrote the dub, or he worked on it, and the dub is so good that the subtitles, the English subtitles, were changed just to be the dub. So
Yeah.
it is luckily good enough. You can watch the English dub and have the subtitles on, and they match, which is good. As someone who likes subtitles. But sometimes we'll still watch a dub because normally you can't do both because it just fucking makes you crazy.
When it comes to doing dubs of Ghibli films, they tend to pick their voice actors well. I mean, I think Christian Bale as Howl is just one of the best bits of voice acting.
It's a killer
for just
yeah,
a
I
dub.
think the Howl's Moving Castle definitely.
With Billy Crystal as well as Calcifer, that's a fantastic choice.
Yeah, I really love that dub.
Hal's probably one of the ones where I prefer to watch the dub most times if I were to go and rewatch it.
Yeah, I think I like the Kiki's one, but it sounds really weird. Like it sounds like they've recorded it like in a tin can for some reason. It just the audio doesn't sound quite right. But again, that's got another good cast. And we could just name Ghibli films and run through the cast of all the dubs and be pretty impressed.
A podcast like this, or did we just watch the Ghibli films? Was that a podcast, or was it a thing we just did?
I know I watched all of Miyazaki's films like in a week. I think we watched a couple of them together, Tony.
Yeah, that was cool.
That might be it. Yeah, it was. He's actually. Turns out I was wrong. He's actually like the best animation director of all time. Johnny, you've picked Barasai for your TV roundup.
Yes.
I forgot how nonsense it was that Jono gets like 3 picks. Barasai's good though.
Well, I mean, you all basically got your own spin-off show, you know. Ethan's got his Music Mates.
Hey, I gave you one,
Tony got his Animetiate.
Yeah, but Johnny gave me Samurai Jack, so you know it balances out.
Yeah, we've balanced it out. And this is my own little section where I underprepare massively for having to talk about a show I enjoy.
I remember Barasai introducing the word Petergeddon. That's all it needs. That's all it needs to be a great.
Yeah, it's a sort of mockumentary mock news show. Sort of back when those things were more
funny.
new, and more funny. And it's sort of, I mean, it was obviously doing the thing where it was picking up on what was beginning to happen, the kind of changing of news from information to more entertainment, and sort of misinformation and sort of rolling with that basically. And it's just very funny and very entertaining from like little jokes like their animations for whenever they come in and out of the ad break is just ridiculously long and overdone and over the top. And I think whether they really reach a good level of that with the final episode they did, Petergeddon, where just the animations of it, or the are just so funny the way they're over the top in their delivery.
Didn't that episode get banned as well?
Yeah, it was so good it pretty much like killed Barasai.
I mean babies about things like that though.
Yeah, I mean the show was kind of. Yeah, I mean the show had been getting a bad name for a lot of its time just because it was tricking celebrities into coming on and thinking that they were actually advocating for something real. When I mean the well-known one is Cake. This sort of
Cake is a made-up drug.
Yeah,
giant yellow pill.
Yeah, getting all these celebrities to say ridiculously over-top things about a fake drug that clearly must have been made up, like literally getting them to say it was a made-up drug, but with all seriousness.
The best thing to come out with that was there was a politician, right, who spoke about it in the Houses of Commons.
That's what I was going to bring up. Yeah, that they actually got a politician to bring it up in Parliament, that was. Yeah, that was part of the level, I think, where people were like, we can't just let this show do this.
I want to see how far they could go. I think there's a kind of vibe I remember from it, where it's this like news thing, right? But it's got like a Impractical Jokers or like Nathan For You style thing, where they just go out into the world and they just fuck with people. And I think that style of comedy is, really funny, like fucking Eric Andre.
One of my favourite jokes from it is I think it's like the narration is like, but why are people so scared of technology? And then it cuts to just in the street, this guy with a sign that says technology just suddenly just brandishing it in some passers-by face shouting technology, and the guy goes, ah!
That's such a like dumb way to like fake prove a point, but you can see it convincing people. Oh man,
it's just it's very good. Yeah. I think
I feel like we need another Brass Eye for the Monday.
I think the problem is just that Chris Morris was like very ahead of his time, and he does. I don't think he's very interested in doing it again. But
because before Brass Eye, he did basically the same thing as a radio show, and then he also did the Day to Day, which is again sort of very similar to Brass Eye, but more news show-esque.
Yeah, Johnny, I was literally about to say this. So it starts as the radio with Chris Morris and like Iannucci, and that's actually where the character Alan Partridge first originated from. And the Day to Day is more like sketch comedy, and that's on the BBC. And that's only 6 episodes. And again, that's Armando Iannucci and Steve Coogan's on that and doing the Alan Partridge character. And then the Day to Day, Brass Eye is like 6 episodes on Channel 4. And I think it's pretty much just Chris Morris. I know Iannucci was involved in the one-off Peter Geddon special, which kind of was like 2 years afterwards. And for me, I think the half an hour Peter Geddon is probably the funniest half an hour of anything ever. Like I've seen it like at least 10 times, and it never fails to like make me laugh all the way through.
It is so quite funny, but I don't know why this one resonated with me the most in terms of how funny I found it. But the first one about animal cruelty, I think I might have seen that one actually more times than Peter Geddon.
Yeah, Animals is one that also. I mean they're all very good, but Animals is close to being my favourite.
Yeah, so I think I've seen the Animals one a lot, and I've seen Peter Geddon a lot, and I think everyone in between I might have seen just the one time. No more than that.
I think Drugs is great. There's a couple that I think are slightly weaker, just because the topics like a little bit like less defined, I guess. It's also got one of the best first scenes of any show ever, which is like Chris Morris talking to someone who makes a point, and he just goes, "You're wrong, and you're a grotesquely ugly freak," and then it pauses and he starts talking to the audience.
I love that.
Oh, the problem with something like Brass Eye is that it never could go on for very long. Not only because you said you can't really let them get away with something like this, but because if it runs too long, then people just wouldn't talk to you anymore because they knew that you were going to try and put them on TV embarrassing themselves. So it could never run longer than a season, maybe 2 if they got lucky. For that reason.
I think it definitely, like, reality caught up with it as well.
Yeah. I mean, it was insane the amount of guests they could get on there, like high-profile people. Gary Lineker was on one episode. I think, who's that singer that they talk about in American Psycho? The one who was in Genesis. I'm pretty sure he was in an episode as well.
Phil Collins,
yeah. Was he not in one of them?
Maybe. It's been a few years since I've seen him.
Jono, is it related to Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, or am I just confusing that because they're both things you've picked?
I don't think there's a relation between the two.
Nah, I think they're both just Channel 4 like cult comedies that ran for one season. Both great though.
Right, so we get onto Starship Troopers then.
Yeah, Brass Eye is just a bit better.
Let's start the podcast. All right, I'm cutting all that. Yeah, cutting all that preamble. Right. We're just warmed up now.
I think I really like Starship Troopers. Yeah. But don't know how much I have to say about it. Right. So Starship Troopers is a 1997 film, so I picked it. Directed by Paul Verhoeven, who is I think he's from Holland. So he's a Dutch filmmaker who grew up in Nazi-occupied Holland, and before becoming a filmmaker, he basically came over to America in maybe the 80s, or maybe the kind of late 70s, and started a career as a Hollywood director. And his primary obsessions are kind of science fiction with an incredibly violent element, and kind of like thrillers with an incredibly like sex element, I guess. I don't want to say sexy element.
Erotic.
Yeah, he does like a lot of. They basically like revived the erotic thriller with Basic Instinct and killed it with Showgirls. And if you look at RoboCop, Total Recall, Hollow Man, I guess, and then Starship Troopers, he kind of, violent, kind of interesting sci-fi with a very satirical element. He's like pretty much openly a socialist, has good politics, and his films are pretty much about his like disgust with America, and I think he satirizes it pretty brilliantly. Starship Troopers is a miracle. Like I have no idea how the fuck this film exists. It's like deliberately bad in the way that only I think like David Lynch films I've seen have done this, where you make something that's like not good, but, like on purpose. It kind of it snuck through the studio system because the kind of producer in charge of it was like getting fired and a new one was coming on. It's just like, and by the time they caught like on to what it was almost too late. So it kind of got marketed as like the film it's like pretending to be, in this kind of incredibly fascist kind of kill the bugs thing. Which is, it's weird that it has sequels. Also, we haven't mentioned it. I know it has sequels, and I think they missed the point. It's also based on a book that's like pretty much the politics that the film is mocking. The book has. It's like, the military should only be able to vote. You know.
Yeah, that is So that is one of the author's like literal views there. It's a very right-wing book.
That's funny.
And they did the great thing of like adapting it by just completely taking the piss, and the whole thing is just like a big joke. And I don't know. I find it very funny. Yeah. There's a lot of moments in this film that are incredibly funny, and I think in terms of like evaluating it as like a film on its own as well, it's like it is. The acting is very wooden, and like the dialogue is stilted. I guess that's the point. The action scenes are like well done. Like the effects are really good.
It's pretty compelling at times.
It's incredibly gory. Like when they first land on the bug planet, that scene is fucking like because it's so it's so I don't know cheesy up until the moment they first land on that bug planet. And I guess that's what makes that scene so jarring and effective.
Yeah. It's the whiplash between it's gonna be great, it's gonna be so much fun, let's do a war, and then just the immediate this is fucking terrible. This is not good. But sucks, still trying to keep that veneer of action film. Kill the bugs.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious what it's doing. Like I've definitely seen people talk about it who like. I don't know if they got the point, but I mean the first scene is like the propaganda reels, which are like I guess pretty much like the really
would you like to know
funny bits.
Yeah, I love the way the propaganda is just sprinkled throughout. Like there's some of my favourite moments where it'll just cut to that and you're like, yeah.
Yeah, my favourite one is that one where it's like, this guy was tried today, watch his execution tonight at 9.
Yeah. I think there's something really strange about it though, because you see what it's doing, right? You see that it's like taking the sort of idea of like a American action movie, right, where the bad guys are just there to be obliterated, you know, and it's about imperialism and like parodying that in a sense and putting it in this space context, you know, taking the fucking conservatism up to 1,000 with, you know, executing people, but like. I was expecting there to be like if you agreed with this, you were actually dumb type B ending to it. And it kind of doesn't do that, which is, I don't want to say strange, I think that makes sense. I think if they had gone around and turned around and been like, America sucks, this film would not have been made in a more literal way.
I have a good quote from interview from 2014 with Verhoeven, where someone asked him, "Why are you doing a right-wing fascist movie?" To which he replied, "If I tell the world that a right-wing fascist way of doing things doesn't work, then no one will listen to me. So I'm going to make a perfect fascist world where everyone is beautiful, everyone is shiny, everything has big guns and fancy ships, but it's only good for killing fucking bugs." So like that's. Yeah, the whole conceit of the movie is kind of the I think, is this is the best you could imagine this system working, and it is inherently bad.
Yeah.
And doesn't it end with like the main characters have like taken like the positions of power even though they're incredibly young? And it does kind of almost like it's not like they break the fourth wall, but it kind of ends with on those propaganda reels, right?
Yeah.
Which
Well,
kind of
the fact that the final shot is like of a child holding their guns, of going, "I'm ready," is sort of like, yeah, they're all gonna die doing this. They
the
can't
fact that the
win
young
this.
characters who were so like they were in school at the start of the film, and now they're like in charge of the Rico is like a general now, isn't he? It's pretty much, and then you see like the next kind of generation coming up.
As much as
also, they're not very good at like killing the bugs.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like the thing that they're intending to do, and they're really bad at it. Also, my theory that I don't think anyone else believes is like do they know that the asteroids are like being they're being shot at? Because I feel like there's a case to be made that asteroids are hitting the Earth, and they found this bug planet, which Earth was they started the war, right? Like the aliens are pretty much protecting themselves, and like they're viewing this like these asteroids hitting Earth as just like they're being attacked, even though like it's pretty. I don't know. For me, anyway, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like
that's my reading.
Yeah,
that this is just it's a natural thing, and their response is to like invade the nearby people. You could sort of say that because it's a very because it is just fascism to its most extreme and final sort of place, and like everything is so literally whitewashed that you get the feeling they've purged all the distance from Earth, and so now when a meteor hits, they can't just go, bad stuff happens sometimes. It's got to be, oh, and it's the bugs over there. We have to exterminate all these bugs now. They're the reason that your life is not meaningful. So
you're saying it's been whitewashed. What are you talking about? Casper Van Dien was definitely from Buenos Aires.
Yeah, it's strange because that's the kind of reversal I was expecting, Harry. I was expecting the final reveal to be like, oh, the asteroid was innocent. I don't know.
Yeah,
but that didn't come. I get that makes sense, right? Because it's about how like the flow of information would be controlled. You know. Even if they were innocent bugs, you wouldn't know. But
I mean,
it kind of gives them plausible deniability, though. Is the thing. It kind of is like, well, maybe they did do it. Maybe you got to gas a few fucking 1,000 bug planets or whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's the one of the like propaganda news things that goes in is someone who is debating from the point of view of the bugs and saying. Can't remember exactly what point they're making, but they are sort of saying we could talk to them, we could arrange some sort of peace.
The idea of a thinking bug
response to entering their environment.
He's got the bow tie.
There's that one it's got the fucking dumb fucking fake news thing, like 20 years ahead of its time, where it's some guy being like arguing with reality in front of him by being like, this stuff can't happen. That's ridiculous. Just a thing that's in front of him, you know. Staring him down when he's talking about the bugs being smart or whatever, and you meet the bug slug at the end.
So what you were saying, Tony, I think it would be a worse film if it had that moment where it suddenly just kind of revealed itself.
Yeah,
but I think as the film goes on, it plays its hand more. Like the moment that is like maybe the funniest in the film is when Neil Patrick Harris, at that point famous for playing like a child prodigy on TV, shows up like as the Gestapo, and then he goes down to like get the vagina bug and like make it afraid. Like, but by the end of the film, like they're not trying to hide anything.
That's true. That's true.
That is one of my favorite moments. Is the two different deliveries of the line. Like, what is it? It's afraid, and then it's afraid. just the. Just because you hear the first one, you're like, oh shit, they've done something legitimately horrible, and then they're just like, yeah,
winning. I think I think there's a lot of I kind of like that in a way that it's played pretty subtly, you know. Well, I say that he does walk in on stage in a Nazi outfit, but like earlier on in the film, where it's like he says, what they called? What does MI stand for? Military infantry. Military infants, because they're young. The guy says the MI made me the man I am today, and he's got a robot hand, and then it cuts to below from waist down, and he's got no legs, and it's just like there's just it feels like very matter of fact. Like it's not like it's like playing it straight, you know. It's not like it doesn't feel like a punchline. It feels like it's what happens. His legs got blown off.
I mean, it's satire working well and being good, that you know what that character genuinely is meaning and saying at that moment, and you also know what the director is telling you at that moment, which is this has made him the man he is today, which is broken.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely like a fear in a lot of satire that to make a good one, you almost have to like flirt with people misunderstanding it. But also,
I think
like
run that
to
risk
do an honest presentation of the thing you're trying to satirize. Like the world of Starship Troopers isn't like that. Racism is over, mainly because it's mostly white people. But there's no racism. Like gender equality has been achieved. You know, like for a certain section of people, that life is fantastic. And I feel like the very honest presentation of this, I think it works to the film's benefit, because like they have achieved like certain things about this society are good, but then the only purpose for pretty much anyone is just to die in this endless war. And like the only people, like it's just throwaway lines like oh, I'm serving so I can have a child, you know, or just kind of lines like that are like the kind of I don't know. I think it's good. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. Fun. I think it's very good. I think there's a lot of like, as you said, like you know what the character's meaning and know what the director's meaning. Like you can kind of read the two levels of that simultaneously. And I think even just as like, as you said, the action scenes being good, even as just you're watching an action film at the end of the day, like apart from the satire, if the meat and bones of the film, you know, was about boring, if you didn't give a fuck about the characters, I don't think it would fly as well. I don't think you would buy into it as much. And I think even on that simple stuff, it does a good enough job. You know, you'll believe.
Yeah, I guess I could see someone not enjoying like the love triangle because it's. I wouldn't say is it deliberately bad? I mean, it's bad.
I mean, it's like tacky and cheesy. But I'm like, okay, it's there. It's there. You know, I'm buying it.
Commander giving them like 20 minutes to fuck.
Yeah, come on. You see a moment like that, you'll fucking enjoy that stuff.
Like getting Casper Van Dien and Denise Richards being like literally like casting from like American soaps and getting them to play it like a soap opera, and getting like such an incredibly attractive cast, and then to make his point, having it be like so sexless. Like there's the scene where they all shower together and there's just like no one is like horny is like the thing. They can't fuck until they get told to. The love triangle, I mean it's really bad. But I guess that's why I think it's so good.
My favourite take is because I watched this with some of my friends, and one of them, they didn't like the violence at all. That was too much for them. But like the only thing they would say at the end of the film was pretty much, I like the romance. It's like, what?
Some people are romantics, Jono. You know, even if they are cardboard cut, everyone in this film looks like someone that would be in an advert for like a dentist.
Yeah, they're just hot slabs of meat.
To be fair, 9 out of 10 dentists.
And then there's Jake Busey as well.
Pretty hot.
He's there.
So I think, what was it? Inception, you would say, has the highest cast. I think this one's up there.
Yeah, I mean, any film that has Jake Busey is immediately pretty up there. I mean, he's got those pretty big buck teeth. You got to respect that.
Yeah, it's. I think I remember watching this film when I was younger, right? I think I've imagined some parts of it because I expected there to be an end credit scene that just didn't exist, where it's like a fake out and the entire film is like a sign up ad, and there's like a baby that they speak to and they're like, yo, you want to sign up? And the baby's like, no. Well, the baby's not like, no, the mother of the baby. Anyway, point being aside, there's a lot of this film that I remember like, oh yeah, I remember being completely traumatized as a kid watching this because it's gross.
Yeah, a guy just pokes his finger through a guy's head hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't even mind the violence that much. Like when people just get like cleaved, I'm like, okay, I guess. But when it's like the practical effect for like the alien organs that are in that one dissecting scene early on, they're really good effects, to be fair. Everything looks like really shiny and like kind of believable. But
you can't CGI some goop.
It's fucking gross. So gross.
Yeah.
But,
I really enjoy
good effect work.
This film and RoboCop, how Verhoeven just pushes the violence to the limit. Because, like, I don't know, he's kind of tapping into, like, what the American public want there. And he's definitely making the point with this film by just going completely over the top with the violence. And knowing it will, like, to some people, they'll just kind of enjoy it purely for that. And I think his violent sci-fi work is more acclaimed than his kind of work making erotic films. Just because there is this kind of hypocrisy where you can show someone being blown to bits, but you can't show sex, really. He definitely tries to explore in Showgirls, and I think the negative reception to Showgirls, in trying to make a kind of satire about sex, kind of shows how the American public, maybe they're ready to accept satire about violence more than they are about sex. And there's that moment in this film where the brain bug gets probed, he gets poked with a big stick, and they put the censored over it, which I think is almost him making that point after Showgirls. Because I think this might have been the film he made after that had flopped. And then he only made Hollow Man and then went back to making films like Elle and Black Book in France.
Yeah, I need to watch more of Verhoeven stuff, because I've just randomly decided he's like one of my favorite, if not favorite, directors, and I've seen 2 of his films.
Good track record though, to be fair. RoboCop, this, I'll take it.
Yeah,
you need to watch Showgirls next, Johnny.
Oh yeah, get the family round.
Showgirls has a similar thing where he casts someone who was like a famous kind of child star, and she's not great. And I think that I don't know if he threw her under the bus by casting someone he knew wouldn't be great, but yeah, that is a performance. Elizabeth Berkley in Showgirls. I think it makes Denise Richards and Casper Van Dien look like Oscar kind of caliber actors in Starship Troopers. Where is Ethan, by the way?
He's probably somewhere.
I think he's just not got much to say.
I'm hoping to say more about Castlevania.
That's all right. We'll get onto that in what to the audience will be no time at all, but to us there'll be several fucking other global catastrophes by the time we get to Castlevania.
How many
Do
more
you have any
gender
points
reveal
about
wildfires?
The film, though, Ethan? As someone who's seen the film.
Well, I mean, about 8 or 9 months ago.
Yeah, but I mean, you can remember things that happened that long ago, right?
Well, I remember instances and moments, and I remember being. I think Tony a minute ago made a really good point about how you take all of the social satire aside, and it's still extremely entertaining, and it wouldn't quite work as well if you didn't really want to follow the story and the love triangle and those 3 central characters, I guess. And I completely agree with him, because I watched it on the train back from somewhere, and it's an over 2-hour film. But I think what my favourite moments were the adverts, 100%. Because they did feel well ahead of their time, and they were very amusing. But I was just in it for the ride more than anything.
Yeah.
I thought it was an extremely fun and entertaining film, and it was, in some sense, it's almost not very serious at all when it comes to its political message, because it's such a ridiculous, over-the-top film that you can almost just... in some way, you can almost just take away everything else and just appreciate for what it is, which is just a really fun action blockbuster. And that's what
I think that's like quite an interesting point, though, the fact that the film is almost like the film that a fascist society would make, and it's so similar to the kind of, well, it's better than the kind of blockbusters that are getting made by Hollywood. Like, do you think that's almost, it just kind of adds to the social satire of it? That you could just enjoy it as like a solid action film.
I think there's something
on its own.
very interesting of the fact that this is very clearly a film about imperialism, and about how imperialism is bad, like, especially taking into account what I know the director's beliefs to be. But, like, it's about that, yet the enemy, like, fucking force is just, like, these gross aliens that I'm like, I know I'm meant to be, like, sympathetic to these aliens or whatever, but, you know, when one side is these super chiseled fucking soap actors and actresses, the other side is gross aliens, I'm like, come on. Maybe fascism's got a point.
Well, I guess
that's
the bugs are
perceiving,
supposed to
though,
be
right?
how, what
Do you
the
want to know
perception
more?
of the people on Earth. They
Yeah.
see them as bugs that need to be
Of
wiped
course,
out,
that's
and it's
the
more their
parallel it's
perspective.
making. But I think it makes it too well. I'm like, you're selling me on it. Paul, what are you trying to do here?
I could definitely understand why people, some people just like didn't get like see it. They were just like, oh, you know, it's an okay action film. Like at the time, like it's got a bit of a weird message.
If there had been like a bug,
it's
like
so
a human,
straight faced.
you would have
I love
clocked it. But the fact that there's just enough like veneer of like it's viable as like a space to sort of kill all the aliens kind of type B type thing.
What? Because there's so many films that are just like the aliens are the bad guys, and we've got to kill them in this like sci-fi world, and a few of the U.S. soldiers will sacrifice themselves valiantly to solve the whole thing, and it kind of the fact that that is just what a lot of Hollywood films are. There's an interesting sort of point that a lot of our ideas on storytelling they align with fascist ideas quite well, because definitely during sort of the rise of the Nazis in Germany, they were surprisingly happy with and working alongside Hollywood. Because when the Nazis were making propaganda films, they didn't do as well as American war films sort of did in Germany. So the Nazis were just really happy with some of the films that Hollywood was making because they were doing propaganda for militaristic sort of tendencies and the whole fascist ideas better than the Nazis were doing.
I think this film not only kind of took from like Triumph of the Will and Nazi propaganda, but like you were saying, that American wartime propaganda. I think there's as much of that in the kind of the fake adverts in this film as there is the Nazi stuff, which is kind of I think it's pretty much 50-50 the stuff they took.
Another thing with this is more general, but because one of the big fascist ideas is of I can't remember, it's like great person theory or something like that, which is historical events are always sort of done by one powerful figure, basically, isn't that? It's the idea that it's kind of one dude that moves things forwards, and that's just kind of the natural storytelling idea of protagonist that has a lot of impact on the world. Like that's how you make a Hollywood film.
It's quite funny because there's a moment that's very clearly like that, where towards the end of the film where they say like it wasn't technology, it wasn't whatever, it was that guy, and it points to one of like the background characters who came back for the final scene. It's like okay, they were doing the main quest while these guys went on and did their side mission, I guess.
Yeah.
In answer to your point earlier, Harry, by the way, about how whatever it was you said exactly, I don't really want to paraphrase. I think it is definitely an interesting point, but I guess that's where the comedic approach comes and makes it more important, that serves it being a distinction between propaganda and something that's just ultimately satire, right?
Yeah. I think I'm not saying it's like a criticism that you could. I guess it's a strength of the film that you can completely misinterpret it, I guess, because it means they can market it and get fucking sequels and shit.
Yeah, they're playing both sides of the war. They're like they are the military-industrial complex that is secretly in league with the bugs. There's profit at the end of the day.
There isn't that moment where it points it kind of like confronts the audience, but it kind of the whole like would you like to know more and ending on that propaganda reel where the characters of the film are now are the propaganda real? It's definitely questioning the audience, and like the whole thing you've just been watching has been a big propaganda reel. And like, have you been enticed into this? I think it's very interesting, and it's also a good film that I could watch quite often because it makes me laugh throughout. And I think the visual effects, both practical and computer generated, are really good for '97. I mean, a lot of films are quite hard to go back to from the late '90s because CGI came out and they fucking went wild with that. But I think sticking with a lot of practical stuff, you can't really fake it, I guess. The bugs are horrific. That first attack is so effective. And cutting back to the propaganda reel after that first attack is great. Because I think after that point it does play it like you are on, I can't remember the name of the planet, but you're on there for quite like a sustained period of time. So you have like the attack, and then you have like a leader just steps down, right, and then someone else comes in, and then it just kind of carries on getting worse. I think like a point, something that happens a lot in this film to make its message is just the characters constantly fail and like fuck up, and a lot of people die. Like Rico gets someone killed in training. So many people die in that first attack.
Yeah, the first, I guess, but that's one of the first deaths you see is just a training incident gone wrong.
Yeah, you've got that moment when Michael Ironside throws the knife at Jake Busey's hand as well.
That happens a few times, doesn't it? That gag, it's a running joke.
You got Hank from Breaking Bad, he's in the film. Carver from The Wire. It's got a good cast.
It does, yeah.
I've a random bit of trivia left, which is the battle gear was later reused in Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, and also in an episode of Firefly.
It's a good suit.
It does look like
it's a good suit. The one thing I don't like about the effect is the guns. The gun effects look really fake. It looks like they're just waving a gun around and then they added bullet effects in post, which they probably did.
The lasers look good, and that laser
look good, yeah. Why did they use lasers for the whole film? Anyway, a point I was going to make is that about like how this film can be like completely misinterpreted. It's like if you really think about it, like even though this is set in like a satirized hyper-parody universe where fascism is taken up to 11, is the like the meat of the film really that different from like Independence Day? No. It's just I think there's the key difference is that there's the very subtle implication that even though it ends on the note of we've captured the brain bug, we're gonna win eventually, soon TM, you get the sense that like this is never gonna end, and that's the only kind of thing you get as different compared to something like Independence Day, where it's like it's over, we did it, we won, we're at the promised land. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I think Independence Day is like the fucking epitome of like, it's called Independence Day. It's like the epitome of like the patriotism boner film, right?
I mean, the plan was to get this bug and then poke it with a big stick.
Yeah, but they're going to learn its brain powers. They're going to learn how to think like a bug by, I don't know, poking it with a big stick.
The idea of a bug that thinks is just offensive. Right, should we wrap this up then?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Starship Troopers is a good film. I think we talked about it quite a lot. Yeah, I like it. I like it for all the reasons I've just said, that you've just heard. If you're at this point, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Cool.
Anyone else want to go?
Well, I'll go.
Okay,
you go, John.
Yeah, no, Tony. Oh, yeah, no, me. Yeah, so I, similarly to Harry, like this film for all the reasons I've said and others have said. But I'm going to go for a 9.
It's cool.
That's fair enough.
I will come in and say it's pretty good. I think I do quite buy the over the top like action and stilted drama. I think just by virtue of being an anime fan, of just being like, yeah, these don't look completely human in their acting and expressions, but as long as you tell me that they're meant to be sad, through fucking whatever mean, as long as there's like melodrama, I'll take it. And I like that there's a lot of like recurring lines that come up. There's a nice sense of rhythm you get. there's like some phrases that get repeated that are almost like handed down from one generation to the next. There's like fucking "Do you want to live forever?" and some other ones like all the Rico, he takes like the words from his commander, his former commander, right? I was gonna say though that to parallel my point of this film is basically Independence Day, a film that this film basically isn't, that it could have been, but I don't want to say could have been, but like if you actually wanted to make the point of like aliens, like the point that aliens, that the American like xenophobia literally of aliens, parallel that to imperialism and fear of, I don't know, the Middle East, right? If you wanted to make that parallel a lot better, you'd make District 9. And I think that would just like sell like the idea, you know, that's like a sort of refugee crisis type film that has a lot. I think the fact that aliens are portrayed as like human in District 9 kind of gives like, because when I'm watching this, I can suspend my disbelief and believe that the bugs are just hit targets because of the way they're designed, and I get that that's the point, but also it's also selling me on not the point if I can just buy the fascist like lie, whereas District 9 is just a more like dramatic, more like, oh, humans are evil, aliens good type thing. That's totally not the point, but you know what I mean. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. It's quite good. Attractive jawlines in this film.
I'll go last and say that sometimes I'm just happy to kind of sit back and listen to what you guys have to say, because I know that it'll be more interesting than something that I would come up with for a film like this, where I just don't have as much to contribute that you guys haven't already talked about. Before I give it a rating, I'll just say that you can have a film that has the deepest, most profound social commentary of all time, but especially if you're making a comedy, what it needs is entertainment value, and a reason to go from the start to the very end, and I think this film 100% delivers on that in so many ways, and that's really what appealed to me more than anything, so I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Made me think I underscored this. It's a good film.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just a number at the end of the day. Right. So, join us in the next part of the podcast, which is going to be in like 10 seconds while we talk about Castlevania.
Alright, see you right now.
Alright, so the game I picked was 1997's Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I think it's a pretty good game, personally. That's why I picked it. I had, again, like most of my podcast picks around this time, I hadn't played it before, but you know, I looked at good games that came out this year. There were a lot of very long RPGs, like Final Fantasy. There were games that will be hard for you guys to play because of the consoles they're on, and then Castlevania just seemed perfect. You know, it got that Xbox Live Arcade port that is kind of was fairly cheap and, you know, plays pretty well. But yeah, originally the game came out in 1997 for the PlayStation 1, developed by Konami. Castlevania as a series was kind of well-known kind of 2D arcade-style games. Like, they were very challenging, like a Contra-style game. And yeah, it was quite an acclaimed series, but the gameplay was pretty much like entirely different to kind of what it is now. So basically, what made this game different, I guess, was the kind of, instead of just being a simple 2D side-scroller, it was the element of backtracking, a more open world, and the unlocking new items and abilities to reach new areas of a map, which is a genre, which is called Metroidvania, because of this game and Super Metroid, which kind of were the, because video games can't fucking name genres, two games did this style of thing, so now the genre is called Metroidvania. And I'm sure when we come to doing Hollow Knight at some point, if we are doing that, spoilers, we'll probably talk more about Metroidvania as a genre, because Hollow Knight is one. But yeah, this is one of the games that helmed the genre. I guess I'll get into more background detail in a minute. I don't want to do it all now, so I guess I'll ask you guys what you thought of the game. You know, you enjoy it?
Yeah, well, it's a very solid and enjoyable game. It's very well crafted and a good sort of art style.
Yeah, I really like the sprite work on it. I think the reason this game, despite being like 20 years old, more than 20 years old, I should say, it's 23 years old, it really kind of holds up. Is it kind of came out at that time when they were moving away from 2D experiences to 3D experiences, and the original PlayStation's got a lot of games like Tomb Raider and kind of sort of racing games and stuff, Metal Gear, are like more of a 3D style, and that kind of polygonal. If you go back and look at the graphics, they just don't hold up at all. Whereas 2D, you know, it looks good. Pixel art still looks good, and we've had that indie resurgence of 2D games, kind of in the late 2000s. Oh yeah, I don't know what year it would be, around 2010ish, where kind of pixel art came back into style. And if you compare this to that, you could say that this game was made in like 2014, you know, on a small budget.
Yeah.
I guess the only difference is this was a big budget game for the time, you know. But
yeah. It was made in such a way that it hasn't really, well, in visuals hasn't particularly aged, and is so just in terms of like game feel and character responsiveness, it's quite good.
It does hold up, yeah. I think it definitely looks like a game that wasn't released last year. It definitely has a retro feel to it, but it does still hold up in that sense quite well. I agree.
Probably the most dated thing about it is like the like main menu is slightly weird.
Yeah. I guess the fact that when you load in and actually play the game,
odd.
It has that kind of aspect ratio to it that shows where they can't they almost can't make the game widescreen. It has to stay compressed in the original format visually.
Yeah.
Speaking of that main menu, this game kind of packed in an attempt to kind of I don't know, remain new and interesting. They packed a lot in, including this kind of RPG system, which I don't think entirely works. Unless you go to that menu, we get the picture of you and all your stats, which in typical kind of Japanese game design standards, they don't really explain ever. They don't tell you what anything does. You just kind of have to figure it out. The spells, which you can like go to the library and like buy solutions, or you just have to kind of fluke into doing a spell and then you know what it is. But yeah, there's just a lot of shit crammed into that menu, like familiars, spells, items. Then when you go to the items, there's like each item can be put in an individual body part, and you got those D&D stat menus, but I really don't think it makes that much of a difference. It's just kind of clutter, which I guess later kind of Metroidvanias would just clean up that kind of RPG approach.
That's true, but the menu does also serve to do other things, like remind you what collectibles you have and what the purpose of them are, as well as having smaller details like I can't remember what you call them, but those things that can follow you around that can do a little bit of damage, like the skull or the fairy, those cards. And I really like those additions too. I think they're a nice embellishment.
I think the fact that this is such a big map and like you're constantly unlocking things, having it in with a big list, it does give you a sense of progression. The only problem is it's like a 2-hour period at the start of the game where you're unlocking items and they're pretty good. But then once you get the shield rod, you don't really need another weapon. Like all those like short swords and like things you're finding, they're kind of useless. So I guess like if a more modern game might balance those a bit better instead of just putting like the best weapon in the game. Like I don't know. There's like a difficulty curve, and then you get the shield rod, and then it kind of flattens for a while.
Although I don't mind it when you get to, I guess, the second half of the game, where if you actually want to complete it properly, but you don't want to have to just redo the same thing, but this time it's inverted. It's nice to have something that just makes you unbeatable, and you don't have to worry about fighting enemies. You can just walk through them, and that
a la carte shield is
I think that really helps.
I guess. I do like it when a game has an option. It's not like an accessibility option. It's just an item in the game which kind of like breaks it for you if you're not really up for doing it. And it made exploring like every inch of that inverted castle a lot quicker. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Like I was surprised when I look at my playtime of this game and saw that I've almost reached the kind of threshold to completion, the best ending, like the 200% in like under 10 hours. Like I thought I'd played it for much longer than I actually had.
I think it's because you realise early on that what makes the game feel like it takes longer is when you're stuck in a particular location. If you can't get past the boss, if there's a particular staircase that you have to get up that takes a long time, then that's what makes the game kind of feel baggy.
Or maybe you do that staircase on your first go. That's also something that can happen.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of weapon balance, for me, yeah, I guess that's probably another area where it does show its age, is that once I just got like the little stabbing dagger, I just spammed that, and especially on the stairs, if you can get into the right bit, you can be untouchable as you just stab people a lot. So that was a fun but slightly janky moment, a bit because of the quickness of that animation that he does. That I'm just like, oh yeah, Alucard, master swordsman, and I'm just standing there just shanking this guy 50 times.
I think they do a good job with the variety of like weapons and like items and spells, and like you can basically, your Alucard can be entirely different to someone else's in terms of like the attacks you're doing. Obviously the shield rod makes things a lot easier, but like I think it's impressive how if you look at the old Castlevania games, the characters are just big bulky men with whips, but then this game it's completely different. You know, you've got a kind of more feminine design for the main character, and you've got this like complete variety of weapons. Like I don't even think you can have a whip as Alucard. It's they kind of completely changed it up for this one, which I think is kind of I guess why at the time it was so big.
I think where the variety really shows for me as being very strong is actually in the villains and the enemies that you have to fight. I think they put a lot of thought and effort into creating this complete array and range of different enemies that you fight in particular areas with different health bars and things like that. And I think that's really impressive as well. Actually, you can kind of go from one area to the next. And the second you get into that area, not only because the setting as well is very unique, you can just associate a particular enemy with that area quite well because of how unique the design is of them.
I think they build the rooms quite well around the enemies as well, like the placement in the rooms. So there'll be an enemy that knocks you back, and then there'll be like spikes in that room, and they kind of you definitely associate each kind of unique enemy design with the room you're going in. And I love that the inverted castle, which I guess we need to talk about at some point, the fact that they have unique enemies and bosses, kind of like it is a second half to the game. Not that you needed to like do it because it is just more of the game, but maybe some of the best bosses and like enemy designs I think are in that second half that bravely they've allowed to be completely messed. I mean, you do roll credits when you beat Richter as the final boss. You don't need to like do all that stuff where you find the glove, you find out it's Shaft.
The Dark Priest.
Yeah, I think bravely they hid a lot of good content into places that they knew the players wouldn't see, because they knew the players that did find it would have like a more rewarding experience.
But I think really to get to Shaft, you do have to explore that inverted castle and pick up certain collectibles, right? You can't just avoid everything completely. The game does force you to explore it, right?
Yeah, I think cleverly. The story is a guy called Kogi Arashi was promoted to become the series producer and was the assistant director of this game. And he found all the old Castlevania games in like a bargain bin in like whatever the Japanese version of like CEX or Gamers. So his like entire ethos was making this as like replayable as possible, and putting as much into this game so people wouldn't want to throw it away, kind of adding more value to it. And the idea of doing the inverted castle, I think, came later in the process, which is why it's not as well designed, you could say, as the kind of original castle. But yeah, to get to the inverted castle, you have to explore pretty much the whole of the castle. Which, if you brought the game and weren't playing it for a podcast, you probably would do. I think they cleverly they hide certain rings in certain places, and you need certain like you need the spike breaker to get to one, and then you need like the echo bat to get to the other. It's kind of you have to find a thing to find a thing to. And if you were exploring, you would. I guess the only problem is maybe you find a room that you can't explore, and then you find the item later and don't kind of put them together in your mind. But yeah, you have to fully explore the regular castle to unlock the inverted castle, and then I don't think you have to do that much. I think you just have to beat 4 bosses in the inverted castle, but they put them all in all 4 corners of the map.
You're probably
you
right about that. Boss. I think I took it on to myself when I actually did the inverted castle to just explore every inch of it that I could, like I did the first time round.
If you want like the best possible ending, I think it's not. I think you have to beat the final boss, but it's about the amount of the castle you've seen. So it's the when you open that map with the left trigger, which I think is great as well. By the way, I love that button.
Do you think that
it's the amount of kind of cubes you've explored?
Yeah. Do you think that it's not great that you could completely miss half of the game if you don't do a very specific thing to get to it in that final boss?
I don't know. I mean, I like that it rolls credits for you even if you don't. So if you picked up the game and were enjoying it, but I'm sure players kind of would. And I guess it's that whole thing of it's pretty much impossible to not know about the inverted castle today because of the internet and stuff. But I guess in 1997 they wanted to have it still be a secret, and you might hear about it in a gaming magazine or from someone else that's played the game. But it is just something. I don't know. I really respect it. I guess maybe the fucking marketing people didn't at the time. They're pretty pissed off. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's reasonably obvious with it. It's notable that something isn't right if you get that roll credits defeating Richter. So it's
but I wouldn't have thought to do anything differently at all. I'm relatively certain that if neither of you two had mentioned an inverted castle, I would have done that final boss, got the end credits, and been completely satisfied with my experience of the game. It would not have occurred to me at all that there was this alternate way of doing the boss fight where instead of trying to defeat your enemy, you've got to try and beat this ring above his head or whatever it is, a sphere or something. I just wouldn't have noticed that or picked up on it.
Yeah, well, it depends, because it depends what rooms you kind of end up with. If you end up once you've had the conversation with Maria where she's like, yeah, something is on, maybe you should wire this thing that will point out hidden things when you're like fighting the final boss, that might help. It feels quite obvious in that moment if you've explored enough to meet Maria for what was like the third time.
I think it's like you need to get 2 rings and then you wear them in the clock tower, and they say on the rings wearing clock tower, but it's just finding the rings, I guess, and having read the item description.
Yeah, that's the rings.
I guess that's true, but Harry told me there was an inverted castle before I played the game, I think, and he told me, I think, even how it actually gets done. And I'd completely forgotten until after I had finished the first half of the game, completely satisfied that I'd actually played the game, and came back and you told me what it was. And then I went and redid the boss fight and unlocked the inverted castle, now knowing that fact. So going into the game, I did know what I was meant to look out for, but I'd completely forgotten, and even with all the information that Maria gives you, even with it even being there in the final boss as this physical thing that you can destroy, I wasn't able to recollect that in the moment at all. I just didn't think it was obvious enough. I don't even think it's a bad thing at all. I'm not trying to say that I think it's bad. I was just kind of trying to play devil's advocate with this particular question.
Yeah, no, you probably are right, because I definitely had a very different experience playing it pretty much in front of you guys, almost at any moment being like, oh yeah, you'll want to do this, yeah, take a closer look at that ring. Like it's definitely hard for me to know what I would have done or seen.
I do think sometimes playing like older games, especially Japanese ones, like they're using like game FAQs or talking to someone who's played the game, there's no shame in like that. I don't think there's any kind of purity of like, oh, you have to discover things for yourself, because they were fucking obtuse, and even at the time game magazines kind of made their living off explaining things to people. There was the Nintendo Power hotline you'd call up and get tips to beat Nintendo games. Like, they were very obtuse. So, like, there's a point where I was like, okay, I need game FAQs during this game. And, I definitely feel no shame of it, because some things are just in weird places. I guess what makes this game... I don't know if it makes it easier if it's poorly designed. There is a linear way through the castle. I think the guy writing... No, what's he called? Game Maker's Toolkit. Tony's dad. He did like a video on this game and kind of showed you like the path through the map and how it doesn't really open up until you kind of get the bat, and then the entire game opens up. But really, there is just one kind of linear path through it. Whereas some other like later Metroidvanias, what they'd kind of open up a little bit more. So you'd have one path to go through until you get the item, and then you suddenly have 2 different ways to go, and then that becomes 4, and that's kind of more Hollow Knight's design. Whereas this one, it is a linear game for like 4 or 5 hours. Up to you got to do that fucking staircase, which is like the staircase, because we referenced it. Is you have to go up a very long staircase, which just takes a while because the enemies can knock you back and knock you out the room, and then they all respawn. And then once you reach the top of the stairs, you have to like jump up on some bell towers for a bit, and that's really slow and takes a lot of time. And then once you've done that, you do a long corridor, and then you do another long corridor, and then there's a boss you have to beat, and then once you've done the boss, you finally get a save point. But yeah, that run is very funny, just because it's probably like the longest stretch in the game, but it doesn't give you a save point, and the fact that it just takes a long time. And I know personally, when I reached that boss, I would just panic, unless you're Johnny and you do it first time. Also, I forgot about the boss, so when Ethan was doing it, I didn't tell him it was a boss. I think I was watching him play it.
Yeah, you were, and then I managed to do all of that. So going up the staircase, running past the shield that has all the swords picking out that you just got to run past and don't even try and fight. You got one tower, then a corridor, then another tower, then another corridor, and you fight that bird, and then you get the checkpoint afterwards. I actually wish that they'd done more things like that in the game, because it's one of the most memorable parts of it, and the feeling of achievement that I got when I got to that checkpoint, I felt such a sense of accomplishment that I wish they had maybe tried to do that 1 or 2 more times, where there's just a long stretch of difficult sections one after the other, with a conclusion where you have to fight a boss, and then you have that feeling of relief when you get the checkpoint afterwards, knowing that you've explored quite thoroughly a bigger section of the castle.
You made a big chunk of progress.
I remember struggling against a few of the bosses, like the mirror version of Alucard, who looking back isn't that hard. I remember just not knowing how to beat that boss for a while.
See, that's one of my memorable moments, because that's a boss I cheesed because I had the stop time.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it doesn't work for any other boss except Mirror Alucard. And so yeah, I just immediately walked in, froze time, stabbed him a lot with my knife, and then I just won. So he was the easiest boss I came across, and so it was the mixture of doing the staircase run first time and then defeating like Mirror Alucard in a matter of moments. I remember the reaction from you guys of being like, "Oh god, he's gonna do this quickly."
Yeah, because that boss, like, I think you kind of have to like mirror its movements a bit and like not just spam attack, because it would like do payback attacks on you. I remember that being like a real change of pace. I think it's the second of the game. And probably my favourite boss, which is in the inverted castle, so I don't think you've seen it, Johnny. It's just a big ball of like bodies.
Oh no, I have fought that one.
Harry, I think that's in the
just
normal
kind of
castle. I think that's right at the bottom of it.
It's in the normal castle.
Okay, sure, but yeah, that's definitely like my favourite boss. Just the design of it, and like it's kind of hard to beat, because you have to get up to hit the ball of bodies like at the top, and it will like infinitely spawn things if you're on the ground. I think in terms of like the character design and like the challenge of fighting it, it's really hard to hit that top bit unless you've got like the right weapon, or you just keep turning into a bat.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's I found that one really fun.
It is one of the memorable and good boss designs. I just feel, I don't know, the hard to hitness of certain parts feels more like a bit of jank than part of a sort of deliberate challenge to me. But it is a very good design, especially visually. It's one of the things that gets carried over into the Netflix TV series based off Castlevania, and it's done much worse in the show. It sort of changes it up, but it's one of those things. This is one of the bosses that has been in like so many of the games after this one, slightly changed in various ways. But yeah, this was one of the big ones that kind of caught on. I think it's known as Legion or something like that.
Yeah, I think if you look at the old game, Ayama Kanami, she was the character designer, and her like visual kind of design for the games is kind of what carries on. And kind of if you say Castlevania now, you don't think of like a bulky guy with a whip. Kind of, you think of more of like an Alucard kind of character. I think that really changed. Also, the other thing that really kind of gives the game this texture, and if you look at the title Symphony of the Night, it's that soundtrack. You know, I'm going to butcher all these names, but the name of the composer is Michiru Yamane, and she kind of predominantly used like an electronic organ, or kind of try to get like this organ feel. And I really love that the soundtrack. I guess the one problem is maybe I think sometimes some songs are used more than others that aren't as good. So when I think of the soundtrack, I think of songs I like slightly less. But no, I really love the variation, how it gives each room and each area of the castle a unique kind of feeling. It's just full of bangers, you know. And personally, I like the old end credits song that got removed because everyone hated it. I think it's good. Personally, I mean, it's not good.
Is that the one that goes such a thrill?
Kind. I mean, that's the Metal Gear one.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's a similar thing. Also, if we're talking about the music, I think we should probably mention the voice acting because it's pretty famous. I think we probably referenced the opening cutscene, which is the ending of Rondo of Blood, the previous game. This game starts with.
Is a man.
So you sell men's souls and make them your slaves. Yeah, that opening cutscene's great, and also all the other cutscenes. I mean, you've got that boss fight, which is like a nightmare, where it's like you go into a save point and instead of saving, it like takes you into a boss battle. I think that's pretty great. Yeah, the tiny bits of story this game has that I'm sure the anime is like far better as, but you know, they all kind of make this a cohesive experience.
I think the lines can be really, really cheesy and badly written. But I think the actors that they pick, as in just the tone of their voices, does match their characters. I remember when you meet the Grim Reaper at the start, or Death, or whoever it is, and the actor that they picked for that character, I mean, yeah, that's spot on. I think all the other ones as well. Maria for sure.
Yeah, I think it would be quite well to describe it as almost a sort of pantomime. It's sort of so over the top and almost cheesy in a way, but it perfectly fits, I feel, for what it's going for.
Yeah, there's definitely like a camp element to it, which I don't know was intentional at the time, but you know, it's great.
No, I think with the anime series on Netflix, how it sort of changes it up a little, is I think it's perhaps moves away from some of the campness, but it's still definitely there. Like, one of my favourite lines from the anime is when this guy just starts shouting about how he's going to achieve the ultimate goal of philosophy and open the infinite corridor, or some absolute word salad. So yeah, it still does kind of carry through into the anime.
That's good. I'm glad it kept it. I guess the last thing I have to say is, I've mentioned it before, but I really fucking like the map. I like being able to press a button and see where I am. You know, the game that's so obsessed with exploring every little like nook and cranny. I love that I can just bring it up, see where I am, see where the latest save points are, teleport points are. It's great, you know.
I feel like
every
that
game
is
should
good.
Just have a map.
The teleportation rooms and the checkpoint saving rooms are very clearly marked on the map, and I like that. But if I had one problem with it, it's just that I think because... I don't know why this is exactly. I think it's because they're trying to cram so much on one screen, because the map has so many corridors, so much detail to it. But it's the particular rooms themselves where there's gaps in the white lines on the map, where sometimes it's just very, very difficult to actually see that, and you have to just practically press your eyes up against the screen to see that at one particular point in the map there actually is a gap between the two little bits of white lines on either side that shows that there's a doorway there. And it's. Do
you remember that one save room where you can walk through it, but it's the only save room like
that yeah, I remember that one quite well. Yeah,
that was annoying.
Yeah, it was.
Missing that and then having to come back like half an hour later realizing I could just walk.
Although again, I think I kind of have the same experience as Jonathan does, where with all of these sorts of moments where it would have been easily for me to just fuck up, I completely miss something like that. I kind of had you there guiding me most steps of the way, so if I hadn't noticed that myself, you would have been there, I think, to tell me that, and I think you actually did at the time as well, if I remember.
It was a very long time ago.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know, probably because I'd heard you guys say something that for most of those rooms I kind of walked over to the other side to check, and I don't remember. I think the actual room where for the first time there was something on the other side, I might have not actually walked up or looked over at that bit, because I'd just sort of looked enough times that all the others were like, maybe they aren't going to do this. But then I think one of you was there to be like, check that room again. I was like, oh fuck, literally the only room I didn't do that for.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got any other points about the game, or should we wrap it up?
I think it's pretty cool how all the gameplay occurs in just one really big house, basically, just someone's mansion. Just has a lot of corridors to it and a lot of rooms. Just to think that Dracula actually lives in this place, he just walks down the corridors sometimes on his leisurely strolls,
fighting all the enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the way the castle is kind of coded in the anime, because it's a sort of it's not a cohesive building. Basically, it's just magical, nonsensical corridors that kind of sort of everywhere, but also in a specified place. Like part of the early season is just them going like underground into some catacombs, and they just end up in the castle, and I'm like, I guess the castle's just kind of everywhere. And especially one of the things with the anime it sort of points out is how mechanical it is. So you've got pipes and gears, which are sort of a lot of the backgrounds to the castle. That it is a kind of living, breathing entity almost, is sort of how it's kind of treated. Don't know if that's something that's kind of brought up upon with some of the later games, or whether that was part of the feeling they wanted to convey with Symphony of the Night, or whether it was just an idea they had when converting it into an anime. But it's... I
mean, there've been a lot of Castlevania games since. I know that they only did a few more in this kind of style, of the Vania in Metroidvania, and then they kind of got Konami being Konami, fucking just like tanked Castlevania, and then the guy that I mentioned earlier, who can't remember his name, I'm not going to look it up. He's made Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is kind of like the spiritual sequel to this. So yeah, they are making more, but you know, there's no more Castlevania, and there's no more Metal Gear, and there's no more Silent Hill, because fucking Konami are the worst. Yeah.
Sad times.
It is sad. Fucking make more Silent Hill games.
But yeah, back with my point, I feel one of the things is that the castle in Castlevania does feel like one of the characters, or one of the things, and especially with the idea of having it inverted, where it's sort of like this thing that you've become so familiar with is now flipped on its head, sort of literally. I mean, I didn't particularly play around much with the inverted castle, but it's just such a neat idea, and sort of experimenting with the space. I feel like one of the big strengths of this game is the castle.
Yeah, when it's flipped, there is a lot of just flying around as a bat, hugging the ceiling.
I mean, there's that entire corridor, right? We talked about this the other day, Harry, where we were trying to get to the other end of it for some reason, and we just kept trying to go through it and defeat all the enemies, but we just couldn't do it. It took us so many tries until we realised, oh wait, why don't we just use the mist to fly over all of these enemies in the corridor to get...
Mist could pass.
Yeah. That actually brings me on to my other moment, which is probably one of the stupidest things I actually had in the game, where I hadn't saved for a while, and I decided it would be a good idea to be a bat down this very narrow corridor that had spikes on the ceiling and on the floor, until I reached this point where it says mist could pass. and then I tried sneakily to change to mist while I was in bat form, and it just didn't work, and I had to change to Alucard to change to mist, and I died because of spikes. Yeah.
You need the spike breaker.
You do, which you get at the other end of the castle, I'm pretty sure, because this is top left and that's bottom right, so it's very, very far away. Yeah, I actually I can't remember if they have a lot of moments like that, but I like how to get the spike breaker, the object that lets you break spikes, you have to go through this room where there's just spikes everywhere, and you have to navigate it. Well, there's almost an ironic sense of going through something to get an object that kind of relates to it, and I'm trying to think if they ever have moments like that, but I really like obtaining that object in particular.
There's a lot of cool things like that. Like you have to look through that fucking a telescope, and then you see the ferryman, and then the ferryman will be waiting for you. You know, just stuff where you've got to trigger something to get something else, which can be frustrating when you fuck it up, but it's also very satisfying when you figure out where you need to go to get the next thing.
Oh, guys, we've not even talked about the librarian. He's one of the best aspects of the game.
Oh my god. Thank you. Every time you buy a knife. I'm interested in this.
The one shame is because I enjoy that there's like this chute that goes down beneath him where you can pick up an item, but I'm sort of disappointed that once you get like mist and bat form, you can't like go up that chute and surprise him or rob him. It sort of feels like that could have been an interesting way to develop on that even further.
That entire library area was a nightmare. There's fucking 3D books that follow you around.
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing as well, right? It's it was a 2D game on a platform predominantly of 3D games, so they could utilize like 3D elements, like that kind of those books. Now, there's a few other enemies I think that were kind of like 3D. And it just kind of, because of the power of the system, it made the 2D kind of as good as you could get, really. I mean, it feels and plays like a Super Nintendo game, because I think that's what it was originally going to be developed for. The fact it ended up on the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn is kind of a strange development. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got to say. You guys want to rate it, or shall I?
Yeah, I'll start. It feels to me a fairly solid 7 out of 10 game. Just very sort of well done. It's one of those difficult things where perhaps 7 out of 10 would imply a kind of run-of-the-mill game, where obviously this was very inspirational. It helped. It's one half of what created a genre.
Well, you gotta hold it to today's standards. I still think it holds up, but I think it would be unfair just to give it like a 10 because of for the time it was great. I think it's actually more fair to give it what it accurately reflects how it plays today. It's still pretty good.
Yeah.
I think I'll go a little bit higher with an 8, just because I feel like I've spent a lot of time thinking about this game over the years of preparing for this one podcast. I like its place in gaming history as well. And it does play well. I think if it released today, it would also be an 8 out of 10. It's just a fucking very good game.
I'm going to match Harry on that with an 8. I think it has a lot of replayability value. I look forward to doing it again quite soon. I think partly that's just because I know that at some point I can get the shield rod and then the Alucard shield later on, and then the game just becomes a cakewalk, and you could just walk through any area, kill anyone with that shield, and then it just winning is just fun. That's all I'll say.
See, this is why I hate gaming. It appeals to the male, the male fantasy of having a shield rod.
All right, should we end this now?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Arrivederci.